Mason, Michigan.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Present from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Lucky you.
Councilmember Clark.
Present, Mason, Michigan.
Councilmember Josha.
Here from Mason, Michigan.
Councilmember Ferris.
Here, Mason, Michigan.
Councilmember Schaefer. You're muted. You're muted. Councilmember Vogel.
Here from Mason, Michigan.
Councilmember Schaefer.
Can't hear you, Jerry. Can you hear us, Jerry?
Yes, she can hear us. We just can't hear him.
Jerry, if you're out there, can you hear us?
We'll give him
He's rebooting.
Like a seance.
Well, we do have a quorum.
Councilmember Schaefer disappeared again. Jerry, can you say something? No, you're still muted. He must have his speaker or his microphone off or something.
Mr. Mayor, I suggested that he log off and then log back on to try to join with audio.
We'll give him a second. All right, well, we're going to get going, and if he can join us later, then that'll be great. So we have a quorum. Would you all please rise where you are for the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation led by Councilmember DeRocha.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let us pray. Great Creator, be with and watch over and guide this body as we make decisions for the city of Mason. May the sum of the parts be greater than each of the parts in our decision-making tonight. Amen.
Thank you, John. I have no written comments that have been submitted, and looking at the participants list. I see presenters, city employees. I don't know who 517-202-9799 is. Can we unmute that one and see if that's somebody who wishes to speak? I guess I can do that, can't I? Okay. And then Jason Ferguson, I see that name there too, but I see he doesn't even have a microphone connected. So I'm going to assume that he's not interested in speaking. So with that, I guess we have no public comment. So the first item on our agenda is a presentation, Homeless Connection. The presenters are the Path Street Outreach Coordinators, Katie Stewart from Advent House and Edwin Taylor, Housing Services of Mid-Michigan. Katie and Edwin, I don't know how you want to do this, but the floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much for allowing us to do our presentation tonight. I am Edwin Taylor. I'm with Housing Services Mid-Michigan. And my coworker Katie is from Advent House. And Housing Services Mid-Michigan and Advent House created this partnership called PATH. It is a street outreach. So we cover Clinton, Eaton, and Ingham counties, where we go out into the community and locate individuals and families who are experiencing a period of homelessness, and we connect them with the appropriate lead agency. In Ingham County, that's with Holy Cross. We get those connected so that way they can start the process of getting rehoused. We connect people with shelters if they're interested in going into shelter. We connect them with other services that they may need, such as applications to DHHS for medical and food stamps. We also provide food, water, additional supplies that individuals or families may need, so that way they can get through the night, so that way they can survive. We also work with MSU Street Med team, where we go out with them to connect individuals and families who are homeless to medical services. We search your community for those who are homeless. Like I said, we like to work with business owners, landlords, property managers, other agencies in the area, mayors, local officials, and first responders. We understand that the police departments, they get phone calls on those who are homeless, and we always like to work with those police officers and departments, so that way we can create a partnership, so that way if they come across someone who's homeless or a family who's homeless, then we are able to connect with those individuals or families, so that way we can take them from being homeless to get them rehoused. And that's what we do. We just wanted to present quickly on what we do and let you guys know that we do go in your community and search for those who are homeless. Any questions?
I wanted to add too, we have also connected with some of your local organizations within Mason. I know I met with somebody from the First Church of Nazarene. The Capital Area Community Center knows about us. Best Sellers has been a really good partner as far as keeping an eye downtown for us. First Baptist Church of Leslie. And then also in the corner resale, I know that they work with a different outreach organization that they have been really great as far as giving us leads of people in the community. We've been monitoring like community Facebook pages, things of that nature. So we just more or less wanted to come and let you guys know that we're out here and we're really trying to partner with anybody and everybody that we can to make sure that anybody that's in your community, whether or not they're Mason residents or just passing through, family members, things of that nature, they're getting connected with the resources that they need, and make sure that they know that they don't necessarily have to get housed in Lansing. We work throughout the whole county.
Mayor Whipple, you are on mute.
Oh, well, I just said some very profound things too that I'll never be able to repeat. Thank you, Katie and Edwin, for coming to the meeting and describing what it is you do. We do have some information in the packet that I'm assuming you provided regarding the services that you deal with. That'll be available for people to see if they want to check in after or see this meeting after the fact and want to get additional information. So I appreciate you coming by.
Yeah, and those are a picture of our waterproof double-sided resource cards that we'd really would like to get to your guys' police department or anybody else that would be in contact with any of our citizens that can be handed out. So if you have a place that I could either like drop those off or how you want to handle that, just let us know. We're in the area pretty frequently.
City Manager Stewart, I don't know if you heard that, but should she contact you or Chief Hansen directly?
She can actually, if she wants to just drop them off at the customer service desk between 9 and 4, they are probably the most likely to distribute and can get them to our police department as well. And that's right in City Hall.
Great, thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? All righty, thank you very much. Before we move on with our the business part of our agenda, we do have an amended agenda that has been presented by the city manager. This would be the time to take action to amend the agenda if anybody wishes to do so.
Mr. Mayor,
Pro Tem.
I move to amend tonight's agenda as proposed by the city manager.
Second.
Been moved by Brown, seconded by Vogel to amend the agenda for tonight's meeting as proposed by City Manager Stewart. Is there any discussion? Could we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Joa,
Yes.
Councilmember Ferris,
Yes.
Councilmember Schaefer, Councilmember Schaefer, Councilmember Vogel,
Yes.
Mayor Whipple.
Yes. The agenda is approved 6-0. So next we have the consent calendar. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve it? I guess I should first ask, is there anything anyone wants to take off of it? All right, would anyone like to make a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember DeRosa.
I move the approval of the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
It's been moved by DeRosa and seconded by Ferris to approve the consent calendar as presented. Could we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Josha,
Yes.
Councilmember Ferris,
Yes.
Councilmember Schaefer is still not connected. Councilmember Vogel,
Yes.
Mayor Whipple.
Yes. Consent calendar is approved 6-0. No public hearings, and for unfinished business tonight, there was a request that we allow for continuation of the budget workshop with additional questions for the city manager in tonight's meeting. So now is that time. Does anyone have any questions for the city manager regarding the budget proposal that was discussed at our workshop?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir. Councilmember Clark.
I have a few questions, I guess. Bear with me while I get the pages.
No problem.
There's just so many of them to go through, so many questions to ask. Going through the highlights, could you, and I should probably know this, but I don't remember, could you explain to me what a refunding bond is? Guess not.
I think you stumped her. First question.
No, I'm sorry, I was just pulling up the document.
It was so hard. She ran away.
Michelle, I believe is on the phone. I believe this is related to our city hall bond and refinancing. Michelle, can you confirm that?
That's correct. So the bond refunding, it's just the process where we paid off our higher initial bond for the city hall project and got a lower interest rate. So it's called a refunding bond.
Under staffing, you said that some positions have been shifted, but they're not filled during COVID, but they are necessary. Which positions are those in particular?
Sure, I can go over those. Those were ones that we identified in the presentation as having shift. So if you look at that summary of personnel, for example, we had a project specialist that was previously in finance. When that position came open this last year, we did not fill it. It was a position that was split between admin as a special projects half-time and as a bookkeeper the other half-time. We have decided to fill that as a full bookkeeper, with the idea being that we need to start training someone to for succession planning, and it wasn't enough time for part-time. So we didn't add a full-time, we've just eliminated the project specialists, which we talked a little bit, if you remember in our presentation, about the fact that some of those duties would be covered by an internship or fellowship that would be a little more short-term controlled spending when it comes to that. The other position that potentially changed was our utility superintendent. And so we added just another, we shifted that down to a utility operator. With the addition of the assistant city manager and director of public works. He has been evaluating those positions. And so when that position was open, he did not immediately refill it. And at this time, he's thinking that it will be replaced with a utility operator, not a superintendent.
Okay. And I can't remember our mechanics. Are they ASCE certified? Are they certified licensed state mechanics?
I would have to get back to you. I don't have that information available.
Okay. And I was curious on the side with the custodian. Does the custodian deal with the entire building, including the school side?
Yes, but the school pays them directly for the hours dedicated to that.
Okay, that was my question. And I noticed on one of your charts where you, right at the top of the page, it says we're seeing a concerning trend for our general fund capital, where in 2021 it's 7.3 million, and then it goes down and goes down and comes back up slightly. Is this due to revenue sharing? What are you gonna, the COVID situation? What are we attributing that to, or is this something that is just a blip, or is this something that's you see when you say trend, to me that's something that might be a little more long term?
It is. If you look at the chart right below it, it explains that the trend is really related to the Parks and Recreation Plan and the capital that's planned for that.
Okay, so that's all related to Parks and Rec?
Correct.
Okay. one comment I wanted to make about the building inspection fund.
Sure.
Is this the first time that we've broken that out like that?
No, I believe we did it last year as well. It was a fund, and I think it actually indicates if you go to that fund when it was created. This is something that has been recommended for a while, but actually Director Hughes has really pushed for tracking cost more directly so that we can really evaluate our fees tied to actual costs associated with the inspections. If you are going to start to look at fee evaluations and things like that, having this separate accounting fund, really tracking that is the way to do that.
Okay.
It's also recommended by our auditors.
Okay, I just hope it doesn't turn into something where it's a fund where we have to increase all of the fees and everything just to justify the existence. So I was curious about that. The other thing I was going to mention was on the Rayner Bond Fund, because we hit that pretty hard, it looks like. And that I don't think that's going to be around much longer, to tell you the truth, because with a new green attitude, the need for what we have up there, I think, is going to diminish. So I think we ought to start being a little bit more prudent with that particular fund.
Councilmember Clark, before we move on from that, I want to make sure that you're up to speed that that was a conscious decision by the council in a previous fiscal year to start using that fund prior to pursuing any type of millage increase for parks and recreation. The goal was that we should use the balance before we would seek additional tax revenue for it.
Yeah, I understand. It's not any difference, been passed around for years. At one point, council made a conscious effort to say that we weren't going to touch it until we had $1 million in principal in the thing. So it changes on a regular basis. When we're looking at the water and sewer, I was curious why the decrease in billing, but the increase in treatment. That somehow didn't correlate to me.
There's a couple of factors with it. One is that we do have some users that don't purchase water, like Dark Corporation, that just do treatment. But majority of that is because of larger rain events and I&I within the system. So the goal of that chart was to show that it has to be a strategic approach. It can't be just improving the wastewater treatment plant. We really need to be looking at the total system, and our team has a strategy, and they're targeting certain areas and studying them to see why we're getting so much inflow when there are large rain events. So it's a combination of a couple things. It's not just as simple as improving the wastewater treatment plant to address that issue.
All right, I'm really getting close to the end here, I promise. There was one particular place, and I think it was in the part in the chart for DPW. I can't put my hands right on it. too many charts. Okay, I'll find it, and if somebody else has got a question, I'll sit by it for a minute.
I have a question.
Councilmember Vogel.
Is this the time to discuss? So like if we're gonna raise water rates, increase by 8%, but it's gonna be larger later, would it make sense to discuss splitting that up perhaps into 2 separate increases and doing more than 8%? Or do we wait to discuss that during budget? And also, do we wait to discuss for budget? I don't know like what the cost will be for asking the public if they'd like a parks millage increase versus do we trust the numbers, since the 622 count was a good maximum sample size? And do we trust that versus whatever the cost is going to be? I just don't know, when do we discuss that, if that's now, later?
On your first question, it would certainly be appropriate for you to ask the city manager why she chose 8%. But
Hey,
the
Deb.
rest of your questions, I think, are best done when we have the budget before us for action.
Okay.
And go that route.
City Manager Stewart, 8%. Could we talk about why it's 8% at the time?
Sure. I think the goal that we approached this with was we wanted to do a percentage that would ensure that we are covering our costs. We're not redoing the entire fee structure, which if you remember, we talked about in the rate study, the initial phase. And so we knew that when we made our larger increase, it would be a holistic approach with the entire rate structure. So we wanted to do just enough to cover our expenses to kind of get us through this time period before we had more information on the rate study. We also may have an indication of if we get maybe some support for some federal funding in this time frame that may, you know, hopefully impact what that rate study would be. We also will have a better idea of usage rates because right now COVID is impacting them. But I would be happy if it would be helpful for council to provide some options of some different rates and what the potential increase would be. If you wanted me to look at 8, 10, 12 or something, whatever range you're considering, we can provide that for a future meeting so that you can consider that. So you have that information.
I would love that. I just, I forgot that we are doing a rate study. So like that actually answers, this would be more appropriate then. Yeah, I mean, if we're going like 30% or something drastic, like I think Williamston had, or 20, whatever the number is, just what's sellable. So like 10% sounds better to the public than 8%, right? But if we're gonna go 22% full increase, do we chop that up into 2 portions instead of just 22? But thank you for reminding me that we are still waiting on the rate study. And that is all I have. So thank you.
Councilmember Clark, any luck?
Yes, sir. Looking on the water and sewer fund chart, when I see under appropriations, Department 545.00, the Water and Sewer Administration, can you explain to me, some of those numbers don't make any sense to me from the standpoint of the 2021 amended budget was 107,810. The projected activity was 103, but then you get down to fringe benefits and it goes from 39,625 to 24,275 to 155,485. Why would that be?
I can dig through all my files. But most of it I can tell you with fringe benefits. I can give you a very specific answer for that fund, but majority of it is a reallocation of the retirement for MERS, which is impacting the fringe, which we talked a little bit about previously. And then also there's a salary split for the assistant city manager because he's doing work outside of that area where previously that was completely in that area. And so when we made that shift, some of those some of his work got allocated in different areas, but I can get back to you by the next meeting with a specific breakdown of what those numbers entail and why they're
That's
being
just-
switched.
That just kind of jumped off the page at $100,000 increase. And I didn't know why. And that was the same in the, with the water treatment plant. Is that the same kind of stuff where it goes from 98.20 to 97.950 to 145.340? And then the French jumps from 39 to 52.
I didn't hear specifically the area, but I can tell you this particular issue has to do with the MERS reallocation. And so we had to tie the retirees specifically to the department that they're being charged from. So those retirees have now been swapped into where they primarily are from. But what was the other question you had? Which other area?
Well, it was 559.00 in a water treatment plant. That jumped in this year to like 145,340 from 97,950. I can't believe we have that many retirees in that department that are going to cause that kind of an increase.
In the water treatment plant, is that what you're looking at?
Yes.
Because the water treatment plant, the fringe has not changed.
Well, the salaries and wages jumped from 97,950 to 147.
Right, so that's not a retiree issue. That's a
No, but the
allocation of
fringe-
staff. When you're talking about fringe, that's the retiree issue. So if you look at some of the other categories, you'll see that they dropped significantly in fringe. So if you look at like wastewater treatment plant, it dropped significantly because we reallocated those to the areas they're supposed to be in. And so that's why some raised, some lowered, but overall they have not changed significantly. So it's more about placement of staff.
Okay.
And if you look at the water treatment plant, as I mentioned, we shifted from that superintendent role to the utility operator. And so we didn't have a superintendent the entire fiscal year. And so we're looking at filling an operator in that position. And so that's where that water treatment plant adjustment is happening. That position actually left not this last fiscal year, but the year before. And because of COVID, we went into that fiscal year not budgeting to replace it because we weren't filling any positions.
Okay. Okay, that's all I'm going to have for now. Thank you.
Are there any other discussion items regarding the budget?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Schaefer, or is that Mayor Pro Tem Brown?
it's Brown.
Hello, Brown. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and apologies to the city manager that I did not submit questions in advance. So if you need to get back on any of these, I am certainly happy to accommodate in that regard. I just have three brief questions. The first is on the pension and retiree contributions that the city is making. In your narrative, I noticed that we're looking at 2019 figures, I think funding at 65% for pension and 50% for OPEB. I think the Department of Treasury has like a minimum benchmark for cities, and I am not recalling what that benchmark is. I don't know if you or Director Peach might have that that figure handy. I was just curious where we are in relation to what the Treasury minimums were.
We are within the minimums. I'm trying to pull it. I know it was in the presentation. Let me just pull it real quick. It's 60 minimum for MERS and 40 for OPEB, but I do want to caution you that there is a formula. So you have to hit two, you can't be below two of the areas. You have to hit both. And so we are within that. We are not in a corrective action plan, which, by the way, so just so you know, if you don't meet those, you have to go through a corrective action plan with the state where they put together and approve strategies for you to start working on that funding level.
Great, thank you. That was precisely the clarification I was looking for. The second question I had, and this is probably an oddball one. But I recall a few years back, the council had diverted some general fund to one of the fund balances, either assigned or unassigned, for public art. And I was curious if anything remained in that pot, if you will. I think at one point it was either $1,000 or $1,500, and then we might have used it for one project. And I was just curious if there was anything in our assigned or unassigned fund balance for that purpose that remained.
I'm gonna have to get back to you on that one.
That's perfectly fine. And then the last question that I have is, aside from the proposal for water rate increases, are there any other changes that you are recommending for the directory of charges or fees?
Honestly, that we have not provided that evaluation as part of this budget proposal. We are planning to look at some of our fees. I know community development is looking at building inspection and zoning now that they have a better understanding of the actual costs associated with those items. But right now, we do not have a fee proposal in front of you.
Okay. I certainly want to give you the time and space to review that with staff and bring something to the council. I would just ask that at such time that we maybe revisit the cost of renting the community room. I know that was something we talked about with our capital improvements plan. So I would just be curious what comparable room rentals might be, whether it's from the public sector side or otherwise, just so that we can look at whether or not an increase there might be warranted for some of the maintenance of that room.
That makes sense. I think the challenge we have right now is the protocols, depending on what they are, require different levels of service. And so I think we could do one as a best case scenario, but then maybe identify if these protocols are still in place, what that fee would be.
And that makes sense. So thank you. That's all that I have.
I do have a follow-up because we have an amazing finance director who's able to pull that information quickly for you. So she noted that we do have an assigned fund balance for grant matching of about 46,000 that can be used for public art, but it can also be used for other programs. So it's not dedicated only for public art.
Okay, so if my memory serves me correct, whatever we had allocated for public art got rolled into that as sort of like a general pot for those purposes.
Yes.
Great, thanks so much, and I appreciate the quick reference there.
Any other issues on the budget that you'd like to discuss? Do we have Councilmember Schaefer on? Can you hear us now? Can we hear him?
I can hear you.
We can hear you.
We can hear you, Jerry. Welcome.
Thank you.
All righty. I'm hearing no other discussion. We'll move on. Get rid of the book. Under new business, item A is the introduction and first reading of ordinance 234, which is the rezoning of 1041 and 1123 South Jefferson Street to general commercial from light manufacturing. Would someone like to introduce this ordinance?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I move the introduction and first reading of ordinance number 234.
Second.
It's been moved by Brown and seconded by DeRosa, the introduction and first reading of ordinance 234. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
my question is, are we putting the cart before the horse here? This is an issue that should have gone to the planning commission for them to hold a public hearing and discussion, and there has not been one. The paperwork that we have in the packet is it reads like it's a resolution from the planning commission, but the planning commission does not meet, and this was dated the 13th, I think, or yeah, the 13th of April. So according to what I read, the planning commission, once they receive it, the zoning official does reviews and notifies the whole list of a whole litany of individuals and organizations. Then the planning commission will hold a public hearing not less than 45 days or no more than 60 days. then there's a list of review items that they're supposed to address. And then they take a list of their findings of fact and transmit that summary of public hearing and recommended action to the city council. Then once it's received, the city council acts. If the council wants further changes and additions or departures from, it may refer it back to the commission for a further report. So I'm curious, the way the ordinance reads, how we're kind of getting one step ahead of something. Because we're going to read it and have it sitting here, and then next week is supposed to be the public hearing. So it's kind of backwards to me.
Well, we began doing this a couple years ago as a way to expedite the process. The council is only introducing and first reading of this ordinance. It's not being adopted by any means. And it's been reviewed by the city attorney, and we've been instructed that this is a totally legitimate way to handle an ordinance. I agree with you that in the past, we've not done it this way years ago, but in the last few years, we have started doing it this way, especially on rezoning changes that have a time issue from the standpoint of the applicant. If we can accommodate them, we try to. And so that's really the only purpose of doing this in this manner. It can be done either way, where we would introduce and read prior to the Planning Commission public hearing and Planning Commission action, or we could wait until after the Planning Commission action and then do first reading. In this case, it's recommended by the city manager and the community development director that we do the first reading and introduction in advance of the Planning Commission, just to kind of speed the process up a little bit. The council will still.
I really don't have any problem with that, because it's obviously beneficial to the petitioner. But by the same token, if this is something that's been going on for a couple of years, then by now we should have had some kind of an amendment to the ordinance that would read and give us that latitude in black and white, so that if the public should happen to follow up on that, which they can easily do, then they would have the same perspective as us.
And I don't disagree with you. I actually mentioned that to the city manager last week, that maybe that's something we need to look at. But we've been told that we're within our ordinance by doing it this way, because we're not adopting it. We're only introducing it. And because we're not adopting it, we can do it this way, the way it's written. I agree, just for clarification for the world, that if it's an option for people, that we should probably be more explicit in how we describe that. The Planning Commission will still have to take their action. They'll still have to make a recommendation, and their recommendation could very well be to not do this rezoning, in which case the council would take that into consideration when we get it back for the second reading and adoption. But I don't disagree with you that this could be cleaned up a little bit in the ordinance the way it's written.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember Vogel.
I just want to make sure that I heard you say that this is something that has been done a certain way for many years, and that we have now since changed it, which is music to my ears.
It happens.
Sounds good.
Any other discussion on ordinance 234 introduction, first reading? Go ahead.
Just to let you know, Councilmember Vogel, that's the way our ordinance reads.
Yeah.
Okay? So the ordinances are the rules and the laws that we have put together that we're supposed to follow. So as a member of the public or anybody else goes and reads that procedure, and it reads the way that I just laid it out, then it could be perceived by the public or anybody else that some people are getting preferential treatment by expediting this process or going outside of what the ordinance says. That was my point.
I hear you. Just some levity.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to be clear that this is not uncommon in other communities. They have the same language in their ordinances, and that some communities operate this way, where the city council, if it does have a first reading, it goes to them first. It allows for the council to provide additional comments during the public hearing and to be taken into the risk is that if the ordinance changes dramatically, you may need to do another first reading, or if the Planning Commission doesn't recommend it, you may not complete the second reading. The goal here is to engage the council as part of the process, especially on something that is time sensitive. When there is more time, we can take a little more due diligence with the planning commission. But when it impacts an ability for a business to move forward, and the business understands that risk, that it may still take as long. I think we should use whatever tools we can when that process allows. I don't necessarily agree that we need to change the ordinance, because I don't think every ordinance should be handled this way, especially if it's not time sensitive. But when it is time sensitive, I think this offers us an opportunity.
And I guess I don't see, I'm going to state as a matter of fact, we're not violating our ordinance by doing this. I've read the ordinance too, and we're simply changing what had been past practice to do it a different way. So I personally don't see any issue with it. That's just any other discussion? All right, can we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Josha,
Yes.
Councilmember Ferris,
Yes.
Councilmember Schaefer,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogel,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Mayor Whipple.
Yes. Ordinance 234 is introduced and read by a vote of 7-0. Next, we have Resolution 2021-08, which is an amendment to the Rules of Order. It was brought to the council's attention a few weeks ago that perhaps our, at that time, newly adopted Rules of Order were not consistent with state law regarding the ability of somebody to participate in a remote meeting due to a health issue. So myself and Mayor Pro Tem Brown, City Manager Stewart, and the City Attorney Tom Hitch met a couple times and discussed this. And what you have before you today is our collective proposal for how to adjust the medical, whatever you want to call it, reason for participating in a meeting. I think it does a good job of being very consistent with the spirit and the letter of the state act, and also does make obvious that it's a limited thing. So would somebody like to move resolution 2021-08 as being read, or being introduced, excuse me?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I move the adoption of resolution 2021-08.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that resolution 2021-08 be adopted. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing no discussion, could we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Josha,
Yes.
Councilmember Ferris,
Yes.
Councilmember Schaefer,
Yep.
Councilmember Vogel,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
No.
Mayor Whipple.
Yes. Resolution 2021-08 is approved 6-1. Next on the agenda, we have a couple of matters related to a project by Congresswoman Slotkin, the community project funding appropriations request. Before we get going on this, I guess I would ask the city manager, she could just explain generally what Congresswoman Slotkin is trying to do here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We were made aware that the Congresswoman was requesting submissions for potential projects for appropriations last week, and she identified some areas of target. She's planning on recommending 10 projects in the region that she covers be potentially pitched for an appropriation. We were made aware of this, and I know that AM County was also made aware of this. We were approached by the fairgrounds about their project, and they're requesting a letter of support for their project. We are also requesting an approval of a resolution from the city council regarding the submission of our project for the wastewater treatment plant. I did confirm with their office this evening that any letter of support from us to another project does not negatively impact our submission. So we can definitely support the fairground project, and that would not have an impact on our submission. The application is pretty short, but it does definitely improve if you have letters of support or resolutions provided in support of the project. So I know that we have a representative from the fairgrounds on the meeting right now to answer any questions related to their project. And I'm happy to discuss the wastewater treatment plant, although I think you guys are well versed in that project. And also their office is well versed in that project and actually encourage us to apply. So hopefully we will be one of the 10 that she submits.
So the first item we have is a request from the Ingham County Fairgrounds to get a letter from the city of support on behalf of the city council for their submission of an appropriate request to construct a new grandstand. Lindsay McKeever, I believe, is on the line here. If she has video, she can turn it on. If we could let her, and also unmute. If you'd like to give a little background on this, we would give you a few minutes to tell us what's going on. The council is in receipt of the information that you sent earlier today.
Okay, thank you for having me here on the meeting tonight, and thank you for adding this to the agenda on such late notice. I appreciate that. So like City Manager Stewart said, we were just notified about this last week, and the fairgrounds is going to be applying for $2.5 million to build a grandstand here at the fairgrounds, which we haven't had since 2016 with the demolition of the old grandstand. So this is what we're looking to do, is add a 2,700 seat grandstand. That'd be 56 feet wide by 220 feet long. Some of the rows would have seat backs, and then the rest wouldn't. It'd be $1 million for the grandstand, $1 million for the roof, and then another $500,000 for contingency budget and land preparation and anything else that we might need associated with that. So that's what we're looking for. I think it'd be a tremendous addition to the community. I know that the community wants the grandstand, so I'm just asking for your support so we can hopefully get this for our residents here.
All righty, thank you. There it is. Okay, just trying to find the letter. Knew I had it here somewhere. Are there any questions for Ms. McKeever before we move on?
Just one.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
The original plan called for a community room built in under the grandstand, and I did not see that. I know it was probably eliminated for budget reasons at that point, but I didn't know if it was going to be constructed to set that up as a possible future item to be added.
So the original plan from 2016 did include an exposition center, which was quite large, and it was also $20 million, the plan that they got. So that's no longer the plan. We're just going with the grandstand, which is the $2.5 million. For now, I don't know if it really could be added in the future. Certainly not for $20 million. It won't be. But yeah, I think it's just important to, give the community what they want, which is the grandstand. And then I'm confident that we can make more use of it besides 6 days of the fair. So that'd also be the goal. We want to get other events in here that aren't just during Fair Week, which would be economically advantageous to the city. And we want to provide those recreational opportunities to Mason and the surrounding areas.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Lindsay. Lindsay did provide us with a letter that we could approve and the mayor could sign to send showing our support. I guess my first question, city manager, did you have any issues with the letter as written?
I did not, but you may want to authorize your ability to make minor modifications if needed.
Yeah. Because I've read it through, but we did get it later today. So, and we do want to, if the council so approves, then we just want to make sure it's right. Would anybody like to make a motion to authorize the mayor to provide this letter on behalf of the city council with
Mayor,
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Vogel?
motion to authorize to make edits as needed for this letter of support to the Am County Fairgrounds.
Second,
Second.
And moved by Vogel and seconded by Ferris to authorize the mayor to provide a letter of support on behalf of the city council for the appropriation request submitted by the Am County Fairgrounds to construct a new grandstand with minor corrections if necessary. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to thank Lindsay McKeever. She's relatively new to Mason and her momentum is great. This is something, you know, our partnership with the county is huge. Our beloved fairgrounds is something we care about, and we have missed those grandstands. So 2.5 million would be so nice for us to get so that we could have bands and concerts. And our financial impact studies that the fairground has shown in the past, you know, those fair weeks, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So you guys are definitely an asset, and I really appreciate our relationship. So thank you, Lindsay.
Any other discussion on the motion? Could we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Ferris,
yes.
Councilmember Schaefer,
Yep.
Councilmember Vogel,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Josha,
Yes.
Mayor Whipple.
Yes, the motion is approved 7-0. We will get this letter drafted and signed and sent on its merry way as soon as we can. Next on our agenda, Resolution 2021-09, which is a resolution approving the submittal for the community project funding request for the proposed wastewater treatment plant expansion, request by the city for a grant under the same program that we just approved the letter of support for the fairgrounds grandstand. Would anyone like to make a motion regarding Resolution 2021-09?
Mayor,
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
I move the adoption of City Council Resolution 2021-09.
Second.
It's been moved by Brown, seconded by Drosha to adopt Resolution 2021-09. Is there any discussion? All right, can we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Schaefer,
Yeah.
Councilmember Vogel,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Josha,
Yes.
Councilmember Ferris,
Yes,
Mayor Whipple.
Yes. Resolution 2021-09 is approved 7-0. Councilmember reports. Are there any?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Vogel.
I just wondered, I'm getting some nominations for our joint recognition ceremony, and I'm forwarding that to Clerk Jarvis. Do we have a form? I looked online on the website. And do we have a proper form? Because, you know, I don't know what people need to submit. I'm assuming contact information would be good for when we send an invite to someone who was nominated. That would be easier.
Well, we've never allowed public nomination of recipients at that ceremony. It's always been either the school system, city council, or city staff. So I guess if somebody has somebody they want nominated, they should get that information to a council member, and then the council member could take care of that nomination. There is a form that is used by council members and staff. However, I do think it needs to be updated for maybe a date or something that Deb and or Sarah are working on. But we've never, this recognition ceremony has never been something for just general public nominations of recipients.
Well, I don't know what information they need if I'm nominating for the public, for people. So that's, I
Yeah.
guess, clarification on that.
Deb, do you know when the form will be ready?
Yeah, Councilmember Vogel, I did send you a example form from last year. It's gonna be the same information. We are gonna update it with the dates. I know Sarah's working on that. We can get it out this week. It's literally just a date change, but all the information will be the same. And so that information, again, we want to make sure that those are coming from council members. And because it identifies some very specific information about why that person is being nominated and recognized.
You. And then I just wondered, the school is having their board meeting face to face. And so did rules change since their board's the size of ours? I'm assuming we said no to them at City Hall just because we want to also protect our staff at this time, or did face-to-face meetings for Open Meetings Act somehow change and maybe we could be in City Hall sooner than later?
So there was one change that happened effective March 31st, and that change was you are no longer restricted to 25 individuals if it's for a government public meeting. But you still are required to follow all the other requirements, which include social distancing, wearing a mask, and all the other requirements that would be a safe work environment. And so for us, nothing really has changed as far as, the 25 capacity, I don't think was the reason we were limiting other than the master plan and budget meeting. But moving forward, I don't think 25 is an issue for us. We do have to spread out still the 6 feet. We would have to lay out the room in that way, and everyone would have to wear a mask based on the safe work environment rules that are in place. So the school, I believe, is meeting in an alternative location because they knew they would likely have more attendees than that, and being able to spread out and doing all those things. We have indicated, kind of what the layout would look like in our facility. We haven't restricted them from meeting. They just know that they're going to have more attendees than what our facility would allow. We are under a 50% capacity restriction in that room, but I don't think that would negatively impact our ability to have a meeting.
So the cap number is no more than 25
The cap
public people.
The cap used to be you could have no more than 25 in an indoor meeting. That has changed. That cap has been removed for public meetings. It's a specific exception for public meetings that it was effective March 31st. But what it doesn't eliminate is your need to social distance, wear a mask, and follow all the safe work requirements. So when you talk about social distancing, I know Councilmember Vogel has seen the layout of the room. You still would have to keep people 6 feet apart that are in the public, but I don't think that that's a challenge for us. We have enough room where we could have public there 6 feet apart. What we still would have to do is wear masks the entire meeting and social distance. I did reach out to the county to ask what they're planning to do with their emergency order, which is what we're under now instead of the state. They have indicated they plan to extend it for most of the summer, but they're going to do it a month at a time. So we have options, but right now, based on the direction of the council, I'm anticipating that the first meeting that will be in person is our first May meeting, based on the current action.
Thank you.
Any other council member reports?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
since the subject of the joint recognition ceremony was brought up, I was just curious if the school district has shared any logistics of how that will work. I think this is the first time we'd be doing it via Zoom, and since all of us are participating, I'm just, or would be asked to participate, what exactly is that going to look like?
I'm gonna defer to Clerk Jarvis. I know she's been working with the school, but we've asked them for logistical information as they get closer. We did defer to them as, you know, this is mainly their event that we help participate in, and they felt confident that they could make it work with the current technology. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Really, all I was given was the date and the time just to get the ball rolling. I am going to be reaching out more to Becky Hinman in the administrative office at the school. She is on vacation this week. So I will be definitely getting more information because I'm not quite exactly sure how they're going to do it myself. So I will give you that information as soon as I find out.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
Manager Stewart, that the comment you made about this was their event, is that because of this is their turn to host? Because it's supposed to happen 2 times a year. So is that what you meant by that?
I meant that they were taking the lead because they expressed that they would like to recognize school personnel and school individuals, and that it was their desire to have a joint recognition. And we basically said logistically that would be a challenge for us, but if they were willing to take the lead on logistics, that we would move forward in supporting their event. And that's why I made that reference point.
Okay, because this is our event. This started with the city of Mason, and I think the mayor will probably remember. It started with a bunch of Special Olympians up at Central Michigan University that those kids very seldom get recognized for their achievements in those events. And I found out about it. We brought it to the city, and the city was the ones that started this program and recognized those Special Olympians. And that was the very first group. And we did it for a number of years with just the city council until it occurred to us that why should it just be the city council when a lot of what we were recognizing were the achievements of student athletes and scholars. So this is our program. It branched into a twice a year thing from once a year thing, and so I think that little bit of history is, to me, is important to remember.
I just think it's important to recognize that the school does the bulk of the work associated with this event. And they're really putting in majority of the personnel hours. And so if they're doing that, I want to make sure that they're on board. That's why we're leaning on them to say, is this something that you're able to take on at this point? And from a technology perspective, are you able to do that? They do majority of the logistics for us, even in a normal event. We definitely have to prepare documents and things like that, but they do all the setup of that and identification.
Any other council member reports? All righty. I'll flip the page of the agenda. City manager's report. Is there anything you wish to add? Manager's report or advise or whatever.
Yes, I just wanted to note a couple of things. One, I was going to update on the meetings. Thank you, Councilmember Vogel, for preempting that. I also wanted to note the county has reached out about potential projects for their allocation of funds that they have received. They are right now considering doing some type of revolving loan fund to help fund infrastructure in the region with their funding. We have provided them information about the wastewater treatment plant. We did a tour. I also attended one of their leadership meetings to determine how they're going to approach their allocation of federal funds, to see if there's a lot of people that are interested in those funds. I will just say that. And so while we, I think, have a pretty competitive proposal, it sounds like the county is interested in doing infrastructure mainly in a revolving loan fund way. We would evaluate whether that was advantageous for us to not, on whether that makes sense for us to pursue, and how much money would be in that allocation. So I just wanted to make sure that you were aware that we are presenting projects wherever we can to try to get funding and hopefully reduce some of the direct allocation that has to come from our users or from taxpayers. I also wanted to note, we did have an error in the manager's report. Our new volunteer firefighter, we do have a misspelling of his last name, and I just want to make sure I identified that. It's Auge. I'm not going to try to pronounce it. I don't know if the mayor's not having an indication.
We haven't met him yet. I don't
Pronunciation.
want to pronounce it either, and I don't think Leon does either. So
So I just wanted to know that there was that error. And also I do plan on taking the rest of the week off. And so for a much needed little mental break. And so if you have any inquiries during that time frame, please feel free to reach out to Dana or Assistant Manager Olson. They are prepared to answer any questions you may have.
City Manager Stewart,
Yes,
that the Ingham County, that's the 10 million they got, right?
they actually got over 50 million.
Oh, all right. I mean, it sounds like a lot, but it's really not. So, okay.
There was a long list of potential programs that people were pitching at that meeting. So it was going very quickly. I'll just say that.
well, I don't know. It's a third of their budget. If I remember right. We didn't get a third of our budget, not our whole budget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we didn't get a third of any budget. And they got a third of their whole budget. So I'd say that's a pretty good haul from
It is.
That's nice.
any other council member, or I'm sorry, any questions on the city manager's report? All righty, we will be adjourned. Take care, everybody.